Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Family Sedan channel. I have a question for you. Is there any circumstance that could possibly occur in which you would actually hand your XRP over to the SEC? Voluntarily, would you ever do that? Will the SEC get your XRP under any circumstances? There's a reason that I'm asking. And so it actually stems back to something that I was covering on my channel just the other day, and it's been a hot topic for the last couple days or so within the XRP community. And it had to do with the other Ripple-related lawsuit, not the SEC lawsuit, but the Zakhanov case. And I covered that in great detail, so I'm only going to do a minimal amount of table setting, then I'm going to get straight into the new stuff here. But what you need to know is that the Zakhanov case, which dates back to, I believe, a little over half a decade ago, yeah, that's right. It predates the SEC v. Ripple case. It was a class action, or a push for a class action initially, to claim that Ripple sold XRP as an unregistered security. And recently, just the other day, we found out that, indeed, the judge certified the class. So this thing is going to actually move forward here. But would it actually be beneficial? So let's say that the SEC ends up defeating Ripple, and there is a situation in which, that $1.3 billion or so that Ripple allegedly got under illegal means, that's what the SEC claims. Is there any world in which the SEC gets that, and then as a result, you get your piece by giving your XRP to them? Well, Attorney John Deaton talked about just that the other day, and I'm going to share with you his in-depth perspective, and he doesn't hold back here. He's got some strong words, actually. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a legal or financial background of any kind. I'm not offering legal or financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, so what resulted in this conversation? Why did this start? Well, there's an XRP community member named XRP Wing Commander who tagged Attorney Deaton and said, if this verdict goes against Ripple and the judge says XRP is a security, could we find that more XRP holders join the case that are suing Ripple in Oakland, California, rather than waiting for appeal via a Supreme Court decision around the year 2030? And so again, this has to do with the fact that there's an option here. So if there's a poor rule in the SEC v. Ripple case, might that cause even maybe some of the 75,000 or 76,000 roughly XRP holders that John Deaton represents, if there's a bad ruling here, might they jump on board in this Zakhanov case? Because the class has been certified, so this whole thing's moving forward here, right? Well, here's what Attorney Deaton had to say about that. If Ripple loses to the SEC, there won't be any money collected for years, and only if Ripple loses on appeal. If the Supreme Court takes it on appeal, which I believe they will if Congress hasn't acted by then, I believe Ripple hands down wins with the Supreme Court. If the SEC wins, Ripple will appeal, and the status quo that exists today will continue over the next 2 to 5 years. Okay, so let's pause to note here, and I firmly agree with Attorney Deaton here. With the current makeup of the Supreme Court, they are just absolutely against government overreach. And you can look at what happened in that EPA case decision came down last year. If the Supreme Court sees that there's from any government agency any sort of overreach, they smack them down. That's what's going to happen here. That would be my full expectation here. Now the downside, of course, is what he stated here is that it's going to take some time if that happens. 2 to 5 years from now. Whoa. So that's why I've said many times, like, yes, I'd love that clarity, but I want this thing done so badly. I bet most of you out there probably feel the same. I just want this thing over with, which is why I'm hoping that if Ripple wins, that the SEC doesn't appeal, or if they appeal, it's just a show of force, and then they ultimately acquiesce and try and get something out of some sort of finality of the conclusion. Something like that could happen. But anyway, Attorney Deaton continues. Assuming the SEC wins and the civil case lawyers get a win because the judge in California follows Judge Torres's ruling, Ripple will appeal that case as well, and there will be no money for years, if ever. 5 years from now, if Ripple loses all the appeals, the SEC would then collect the money, $1.3 billion, not the civil plaintiffs. So think about this, folks. So yes, there's the Zakhanov case, and the class has been certified, but That doesn't mean that they won or anything. No. We haven't nowhere near that yet. That just means that they're allowed to proceed with their arguments effectively and represent individual XRP holders that meet specific criteria. That's it. So, if Ripple loses on appeals, and again, so this thing plays out over the next, roughly call it upwards of 5 years potentially. Well, that's the point where Ripple would then have to pay the money, say $1.3 billion. But it goes to the SEC, not to the civil plaintiffs. That's what he's citing here. And then Attorney Deaton says the SEC would then offer a payback, a fund for XRP holders to sell their XRP. This is what happened in Veritasium. It's a separate crypto case I've mentioned on the channel a couple times before. Anyway, he says, if I were the plaintiff's attorney in the civil case, I would want the SEC to lose because the SEC winning will gut the damages for the civil case. That's right, folks. Let's pause to process that for a second. If you're the attorneys in the Zakhanov case, you want the SEC to lose. Sounds counterintuitive on the surface, obviously, but you want the SEC to lose. Why? Well, Attorney Deaton explains it. Check this out. Ironically, if there was a recovery, XRP holders would get more money from the SEC fund because in the civil case, the lawyers will get between 25 to 35% of the recovery for attorney fees before the costs of the case are deducted from the fund. So pause and think about this. If Ripple wins, and there can still be a way for the Zakhanov case to move forward, and then if that's won, because again, it can run, I know it might sound silly on the surface, but even if Ripple wins, yes, that case can still proceed potential. So that's when the attorneys might get their 25 to 35% of the cut. So that's the motivating factor for the attorneys. They could, in theory, have an absolutely life-changing, for them, massive payday. Of course, largely at the expense of the XRP holders, because, again, if there were some sort of recovery here, as Attorney Deaton points out, and he talks about it, I think, a little bit more as we go through this, if the SEC were the one in charge of this versus, the lawyers in the Zakhanov case, XRP holders would be better off if the SEC is in charge of it. That sounds crazy, right? But it's true. And again, the reason is it's what I just cited. It's that the Zakhanov attorneys won't get a piece of it then. So that's way more money going to XRP holders. Now, obviously, I don't think any of this should happen. And I think, I know, most of us believe, obviously, that what's occurring here just seems like frivolous lawsuit nonsense action. But we're talking about a hypothetical. We're just playing through it, thinking through it, thought process, little thought exercise here. What happens if? And that's what Attorney Deaton is talking about here. And this actually could happen. I don't think it's probable, but this actually could unfold the way that it's is being described here. And then Attorney Deaton says, being on the 75,000 list, she's talking about the XRP holders, of course, is actually a good thing because a massive putative class of XRP holders is easily identifiable. By joining the class list, I put out no one waived anything whatsoever by joining the list. In fact, if there was ever any money for XRP holders from the civil case or the SEC case, I'd likely be contacted because you have to give notice of the recovery to XRP holders, and I am in possession of a list of 75,000. You must ignore the morons out there who claim by joining the 75,000 list and arguing XRP isn't a security is a bad thing if there is one day a monetary recovery for XRP holders. These morons have no idea what they're talking about. A person can believe that the asset they own isn't a security. I just lost my spot when I scrolled down. Where'd my eyes go? There we go. A person can believe that the asset they own isn't a security, but if that person is wrong because a judge and appellate court says otherwise, you don't get punished for being wrong. If there was a fund that allowed you to sell your XRP to the SEC or back to Ripple because of a lawsuit, you would not be denied because you joined the list saying otherwise. Anyone who tells you different is an idiot. And so, folks, I hope that's incredibly obvious. If you're wrong, just because you're wrong and saying, hey, no, this isn't a security of Ripple, this or that, if you're found to be wrong by the court, that doesn't mean that just because you had an opposing viewpoint that you wouldn't then be allowed, to any sort of remedy in the situation, financial or otherwise. No. So hopefully that helps to kind of break it down. And I understand Attorney Deaton's frustration, which we'll get to in just a second because he explained why, and I don't blame him one bit. But so anyway, he then said, but the reality is I doubt the civil case leads to anything. If the SEC wins in the end, it would collect the most money and offer the best option, ironically. Also, if Ripple loses and Congress fixes this regulatory mess during the 5 years of appeals, it all goes away anyway. Bottom line, being on the list didn't waive anything, and, if anything, it identified your claims, if you have any, long ago. Yeah, so it sounds like, if I'm reading them right here, it sounds like being on that list, if anything, would make it more likely that should things go this way, that you'd actually get some sort of payout ultimately. And I mentioned the other day that, if something like this occurred, I would not, I personally would not engage in any sort of payout. But one little caveat here, because I was explaining, I was like, it seems so unethical to me. Little asterisk here, though. If the money's going to be ripped from Ripple anyway, that would change my calculus, because my thinking at the time, and perhaps I'm mistaken here because I'm not a lawyer and I don't know exactly how it would break down. If, and again, I don't even think it's going to come to this, but if it did, I'm just saying, if Ripple doesn't get the money no matter what, and it's in the SEC's hands, then I wouldn't feel that there's something unethical at that point. But if me choosing to say, yeah, well, I agree, here's my XRP, give me that money that used to be Ripple's, that I'd feel terrible about. So if it were getting ripped out of Ripple's hands specifically because I played along, then I feel like that's where I'm crossing the line, and it's now unethical. Now, that being said, let's play this out a little bit further. So even if that were the case, and say it's 5 years from now, and you can actually hand your XRP over to the SEC and get something because Ripple ultimately paid that $1.3 billion. Let's game this out a little bit. Would that be financially beneficial to you? Or is there a chance that the entire asset class, including XRP, might be worth way, 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 way more 5 years from now, to the point where you'd have to be stupid to hand it over to the SEC to get a slice of what was formerly Ripple's money, or might it be better to just sell on the open market? And I know there could be questions about what the availability for that option would be in the United States. We don't know for sure in half a decade. But I'm just saying my suspicion is that there would still be opportunities. So for me, I think the answer is no. For me, it's about a 0% chance that I would ever do anything of the sort for so many reasons. And if it's something that would harm Ripple, I would just feel like a terrible human. So for me, the answer is still no. But if they're already harmed, and then it's just like, well, okay, well, either the SEC gets to have this. I don't even know what happens if it's not claimed or what. Or I don't know if maybe if I don't claim mine, then it just means a bigger piece of the pie for anybody else that does claim and give their XRP to the SEC. I don't know. And then Attorney Deaton also said this. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh to some people by calling them morons, etc. But when I start getting dozens of emails and phone calls at my office because people have been told by someone, including by lawyers, that adding their name to an amicus class or signing an affidavit that they don't consider XRP a security screwed themselves, it's just not true. And so upon reading that, I was like, yeah, I totally see why he's calling some people morons. I get it. Because he's been attacked effectively as a result. And people contacting his office be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then can you imagine the amount of time that's sucking out of his day or days just to try and calm this? So if any of you out there listening, if you had a concern because you signed up and Attorney Deaton's representing you, fear not. Fear not. Everything's okay. If anything, you did yourself a favor should it come to such a situation, even though I think that's unlikely. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the Moon Family Sedan.